My mother-in-law said I wasn't good enough for her son, now she calls me ma'am. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from, drop your location in the comments. And if you haven't yet, please hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. I stood in Catherine's marble foyer, shopping bags from the dollar store dangling from my hands. My mother-in-law's voice carried from the living room, sharp and clear. She's not good enough for Marcus, Helen. I mean, a social worker? She barely makes $30,000 a year. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Through the doorway, I could see Catherine gesturing dramatically to her friend, a champagne flute glinting in her perfectly manicured hand. My son could have had anyone. Lawyers, doctors, businesswomen. Instead, he chose her. The word dripped with disgust. Helen murmured something I couldn't hear. Catherine laughed bitterly. Good heart? Please. Good hearts don't pay for country club memberships or private schools. Marcus deserves someone on his level, not some charity case who shops at thrift stores. My face burned hot with embarrassment and anger. The bags in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I wanted to walk away, to leave quietly like I always did. But something made me stay. Maybe it was the way she said charity case, or maybe it was because I'd finally had enough. I stepped into the doorway. Catherine's eyes met mine, and for one brief second, her face showed surprise. Then she lifted her chin defiantly, as if daring me to respond. I married Marcus 2 years ago against his mother's very vocal wishes. She made it clear from our first meeting that I wasn't her choice. Catherine Reynolds came from old money, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. Her family owned half the commercial real estate downtown, and she never let anyone forget it. I met Marcus at a community center where I worked. He was volunteering for a weekend project, building bookshelves for kids. He wore paint-splattered jeans and had the kindest smile I'd ever seen. We talked for hours that day about everything except money or status. He never mentioned his family's wealth. When I finally met Catherine 3 months later, her disappointment was instant. She looked at my simple dress, my worn shoes, my practical haircut. Her smile was ice cold. So you're the girl Marcus has been hiding, she said, making hiding sound like ashamed of. From that moment, she made it her mission to remind me I didn't belong. Every family dinner became a test. Every holiday was a comparison between me and the daughters of her wealthy friends. She'd sigh loudly when I arrived in my old car. She'd forget to mention dress codes for fancy events, leaving me underdressed and humiliated. Marcus tried to defend me, but Catherine had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment. It's so sweet that you don't care about appearances, dear. What Catherine didn't know was that my last name meant something too. Before I was Emma Grant, the social worker, I was Emma Chin Grant, daughter of Michael and Susan Chin Grant. My parents built Chin Grant Properties from nothing, turning it into a billion-dollar real estate and investment empire. They also created the Chin Grant Foundation, one of the largest charitable organizations in the state. I grew up in boardrooms and galas, surrounded by wealth that made Catherine's old money look modest. But I hated every second of it. I watched my parents work 18-hour days, missing dance recitals and birthdays. I saw how money changed people, how they smiled to your face while calculating your net worth. When I turned 18, I made a decision. I took a small trust fund my grandmother left me, enough to pay for college and live simply, and I walked away from the rest. My parents were hurt but understanding. Find your own path, my father said. So I did. I studied social work, moved into a tiny apartment, and learned to budget on a real salary. Nobody in my new life knew about my family. I introduced myself as Emma Grant, dropping the chin. I drove a 15-year-old Honda. I shopped at discount stores. And I finally felt free. Marcus knew the truth. I told him on our fourth date, terrified he'd see me differently. We were sitting on a park bench eating cheap tacos when I finally confessed. My family has money. A lot of it. But I don't want any part of that life. I watched his face carefully, waiting for judgment. He just squeezed my hand. I fell in love with you, Emma. Not your bank account or your family name. This doesn't change anything. That's when I knew he was different. Most people either wanted to use my connections or couldn't understand why I'd give up such privilege. Marcus just accepted it. He never told his mother. We agreed it wasn't her business, and honestly, I dreaded what she'd do with that information. Would she suddenly approve of me? Would she brag to her friends? The thought made me sick. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what my family owned. So we kept it quiet. Marcus worked as an architect at a small firm, deliberately choosing not to join his family's real estate company. We lived in a modest apartment, split bills 50-50, and built a life based on what we earned, not what we inherited. It was perfect. Except for Catherine. She never missed an opportunity to remind me I was beneath her son. And I never corrected her. After overhearing Catherine's conversation, I quietly left her house without announcing myself. I sat in my old Honda, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe normally. My phone buzzed. A text from my father's assistant, board meeting moved to Tuesday. Your presence required. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of my double life. 3 days a week, I worked at the community center, helping families navigate housing assistance and job placement programs. I loved that work. The other 2 days, I worked remotely for the Chin Grant Foundation, reviewing grant applications and managing charitable projects. My parents had insisted I stay involved somehow, so we compromised. I could work behind the scenes, using my position to help people without the spotlight. Last month, I'd approved a $3 million grant for homeless services. Yesterday, I'd helped a single mother fill out food stamp applications. Both felt equally important. But sitting in Catherine's driveway, her words echoing in my head, I felt something shift. Not good enough. The phrase burned. I'd spent 2 years enduring her subtle cruelty, her constant implications that I was using Marcus for his money, her suggestions that I wasn't smart enough or refined enough or worthy enough. I'd stayed silent because I believed rising above it was the noble choice. Now, I wasn't so sure. That night, Marcus came home from work and immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked, setting down his briefcase. I told him about overhearing his mother. He went pale, then red with anger. I'm calling her right now. This has to stop. I caught his hand. Wait. Just wait. He looked at me, frustrated. Emma, she can't keep treating you like this. It's been 2 years of this garbage. I knew he was right. But part of me wondered if telling Catherine the truth would actually solve anything, or just create different problems. Let me think about it, I said quietly. That weekend, we were supposed to attend Catherine's annual charity gala. It was the social event she lived for, a chance to parade her wealth and connections in front of the city's elite. She'd made it clear my attendance was mandatory. People will talk if Marcus comes alone, she'd said on the phone, making it sound like she was doing me a favor by letting me attend. I'd already bought a simple black dress from a consignment store. Catherine would probably make some comment about it being cute or practical. The thought exhausted me. Marcus sat beside me on our worn couch. We don't have to go, he offered. But I shook my head. No. I think we should. Something in my voice made him look at me carefully. What are you planning? I smiled slightly. Nothing. Maybe everything. I haven't decided yet. Tuesday's board meeting was held in the Chingrant Properties conference room on the 45th floor of the building my parents built. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. I sat at the massive oak table across from my father, my mother to my left, and 8 other board members filling the remaining seats. We were discussing the foundation's annual budget allocation. The homeless initiative needs more funding, I argued, pulling up spreadsheets on the screen. The need has increased by 30% this year. My father nodded thoughtfully. Agreed. Emma, you have authorization to redirect funds as you see fit. Your instincts on these matters haven't been wrong yet. A board member named Richard spoke up. Emma, have you considered taking a more public role? Your work has been exceptional, but the foundation would benefit from having you as the visible face of these initiatives. I tensed. This conversation came up every few months. I'm more effective behind the scenes, I said firmly. My mother touched my hand gently. It's your choice, sweetheart. Always. After the meeting, my father pulled me aside in his corner office. Is everything okay? You seem distracted. I hesitated, then told him about Catherine. His jaw tightened. Want me to make a phone call? I can have her. No, Dad. I laughed despite myself. No corporate power plays. This is personal. He studied me with those sharp eyes that built an empire. Then handle it your way. But remember, being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. The gala was Saturday night. I spent the day at the community center, helping a veteran fill out disability paperwork. His hands shook as he signed forms, and I felt the familiar satisfaction of making a real difference in someone's immediate life. This was why I chose this path. By 5 o'clock, I was back home, staring at the black dress hanging on our closet door. Marcus came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You could wear a garbage bag and still be the most beautiful woman there, he murmured. I laughed. Your mother would probably prefer the garbage bag. At least it'd be designer trash. He spun me around, his face serious. I meant what I said. We don't have to go. My mother's opinion doesn't matter. But that wasn't quite true, was it? She was his mother. Her constant disapproval created tension in our marriage, whether we admitted it or not. I thought about my father's words. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. Help me with the zipper? I asked, reaching for the dress. The gala was being held at the Grandview Hotel, the most exclusive venue in the city. Coincidentally, a property owned by Chingrant. My parents had built it 15 years ago. I'd attended its grand opening as a teenager, bored in a fancy dress while investors and politicians made speeches. Now I was returning as Catherine's not-good-enough daughter-in-law. The irony wasn't lost on me. We arrived at 7. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and candlelight. Women wore gowns that cost more than I made in months at the community center. Men in tuxedos discussed stock portfolios and golf handicaps. Catherine held court near the center of the room, radiant in a silver gown, her diamond necklace catching the light. She spotted us immediately. Her smile faltered when she saw my simple dress, but she recovered quickly. Marcus, darling. She kissed his cheek, then glanced at me. Emma. How nice. You came. The pause before nice spoke volumes. Her friend Helen appeared, the same woman from the foyer conversation. She looked me up and down with barely disguised pity. Catherine's been telling me about your work with the poor, Helen said, making charity work sound like a contagious disease. How noble of you. Catherine steered Marcus away to meet someone important, leaving me standing alone in the crowd. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and made my way toward the edges of the room, where I felt less exposed. That's when I spotted someone I recognized. David Park, CEO of Park Industries and a longtime friend of my father's. He was talking with a group of businessmen near the silent auction tables. Our eyes met across the room. His face registered surprise, then understanding. He excused himself and walked over. Emma Chin Grant, David said quietly, his smile warm. It's been years. Your father mentioned you were working in social services, but I didn't realize you lived in the city. I glanced around nervously. Catherine was still occupied with Marcus across the room. Just Emma Grant here, I said softly. I'm keeping the family connection quiet. David's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. Understood. Though I have to say, your mother would be devastated to see you hiding in the corner at a gala. She always said you commanded every room you entered. I laughed despite myself. I was 13 and miserable at those things. You funded the hospital wing that saved my daughter's life last year, David said, his voice suddenly serious. The grant from Chin Grant Foundation. Your father told me you personally approved it. My throat tightened. How is she? Perfect. Healthy. Thanks to you. He squeezed my shoulder gently. Whatever reason you have for keeping this quiet, I respect it. But Emma, don't let anyone make you feel small. You're doing more good than everyone in this room combined. He walked away just as Catherine appeared at my elbow. Who was that? She asked, her tone sharp with curiosity. David Park. We met briefly, I said vaguely. Catherine's eyes lit up. David Park? Of Park Industries? Emma, how do you know him? I shrugged. Just passing conversation. She looked suspicious but was distracted by another guest calling her name. As she walked away, I caught Marcus's eye across the room. He gave me a questioning look. I smiled and mouthed, I'm fine. The evening dragged on. Catherine made several pointed comments about Marcus's old girlfriend, Rebecca, who apparently was doing amazing things in commercial law. She just made partner at 30, Catherine gushed to a group of women, making sure her voice carried to where I stood. Some women just have that drive, you know? That ambition. The implication was clear. I didn't. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a break from the barely veiled insults. In the marble-tiled bathroom, I stared at my reflection. My dress was simple but elegant. My hair was neat, my makeup minimal. I looked exactly like who I was, someone who didn't need external validation. So why did Catherine's words still sting? Because somewhere deep down, a small voice wondered if she was right. Not about my worth, but about my choices. Had I gone too far in rejecting my family's world? Was I hiding, or was I being authentic? I thought about the veteran I'd helped today, about the single mother from last week, about the kids at the community center who hugged me and called me Miss Emma. That was real. That mattered. I smoothed my dress and walked back into the ballroom. As I entered, I noticed a commotion near the entrance. Hotel staff were clustered around someone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Then I saw her. My mother, elegant in a deep blue gown, sweeping into the room like she owned it. Which, technically, she did. My heart stopped. Mom wasn't supposed to be here. She usually avoided Catherine's events, respecting my wish for privacy. But here she was, and from the determined set of her jaw, this wasn't a coincidence. Our eyes met across the ballroom. She gave me a slight smile, then turned to the hotel manager who'd rushed to greet her. Mrs. Chin Grant, he said, practically bowing. We didn't expect you this evening. Is everything satisfactory? The room had gone noticeably quieter. People were turning, recognizing one of the city's most powerful women. Catherine, standing near the auction tables, looked confused. I saw her whisper to Helen, "Who is that?" I watched, frozen, as my mother gracefully made her way through the crowd. People parted for her automatically. She stopped to chat briefly with David Park, kissed the mayor's wife on both cheeks, and complimented a city council member on his recent policy proposal. She commanded the room effortlessly. Finally, inevitably, she reached Catherine. "You must be Marcus's mother," Mom said, extending her hand. "I'm Susan Grant. I've heard so much about you." Catherine's face was a mixture of confusion and delight at being acknowledged by someone so clearly important. She shook Mom's hand eagerly. "Grant? As in Grant Properties?" "Among other things," Mom said smoothly. Then she turned, scanning the room until she found me. "There's my daughter. Emma, darling, come say hello." The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the notification bell so you stay updated. I walked toward my mother on shaking legs. Every eye in the room followed me. Catherine's face had gone from delighted to utterly confused. I reached Mom's side, and she wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. "Catherine, I believe you've met my daughter, Emma," Mom said pleasantly. The silence was deafening. I watched Catherine's brain work, trying to process the information. Her mouth opened, then closed. Helen, beside her, had gone pale. "Your daughter?" Catherine finally managed. "But Emma's last name is Grant. She's a social worker. She lives in a modest apartment." "Yes," Mom finished. "Emma has always been independent. She chose to build her own life rather than rely on family connections. I'm incredibly proud of her for that." Marcus appeared at my other side. He looked at Mom, then at me, then at his own mother's shocked face. A small smile played at his lips. Catherine was still trying to understand. "But you said, Emma, you never mentioned. You never asked," I said quietly. "You made assumptions about who I was based on my job and my car. I let you believe what you wanted to believe." David Park materialized beside us, grinning broadly. "Susan, you should tell them about the foundation work Emma's been doing. The board was just praising her strategic vision last week." Mom beamed. "Emma runs our charitable division. She's approved over $50 million in grants this year alone. Last month, she secured funding for 3 new homeless shelters and a youth center." Catherine looked like she might faint. $50 million? "Give or take," I said, my voice steadier now. The mayor approached our little group, clearly delighted to see my mother. "Susan, I didn't know you'd be here. Is Michael coming?" "He's in Singapore on business," Mom replied. "But he sends his regards. And his checkbook, as always." Everyone laughed. The mayor turned to me. "Emma, I heard about your proposal for the housing initiative. Brilliant work. The city council is voting on it next month, and I'm confident it'll pass. Your foundation's matching funds made all the difference." Catherine's face had gone from pale to blotchy red. People were staring now, some with amused smiles, others with curious expressions. The gossip chain was already working overtime. "I don't understand," Catherine said, her voice tight. "Why wouldn't you tell us? Why pretend to be poor?" I supplied. "I wasn't pretending, Catherine. I am a social worker. I do make $30,000 a year at the community center. Everything you saw was real. I just didn't mention the trust fund or the foundation work because it wasn't relevant to my relationship with your son." Marcus slipped his hand into mine, squeezing it. Catherine looked at him accusingly. "You knew?" "Of course I knew," Marcus said. "I fell in love with Emma knowing exactly who she was and what she chose to be. Unlike you, I didn't need her family's money or status to see her worth. The words landed like stones. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but they looked more like tears of humiliation than sadness. Mom, sensing the tension reaching a breaking point, smoothly intervened. Catherine, I understand this must be surprising. Emma values her privacy tremendously, and I respect that. But I couldn't stay away tonight after hearing. She paused delicately. Well, I thought it was time I attended one of your famous galas. Everyone speaks so highly of them. It was a graceful exit ramp, a chance for Catherine to recover some dignity. But Catherine wasn't ready to take it. You let me think she was nobody, she said, her voice shaking. You let me say terrible things. You let me treat her like she was beneath us. Actually, I said, my voice calm but firm, you chose to say terrible things. You chose to treat me like I was beneath you. I didn't make you do any of that, Catherine. Your assumptions and your behavior are your own. The people around us were trying to pretend they weren't listening, but the silence was absolute. Catherine's friend Helen had quietly backed away, suddenly fascinated by the auction items. I called you not good enough, Catherine whispered, realization crashing over her. I said you were a charity case. I said Marcus could do better. You did, I agreed. Multiple times, in multiple ways, for 2 solid years. Marcus's grip on my hand tightened. His voice was cold when he spoke. And you know what, Mother? Emma was kind enough to never throw her family's money in your face. She could have destroyed you with a single phone call. Do you know that half the people in this room rely on Chin Grant Foundation grants for their charities? That 3 buildings you brag about having apartments in are owned by Emma's family? She could have humiliated you 1,000 times over, and she never did. A well-dressed woman I didn't recognize approached hesitantly. I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you the Emma Grant who approved the grant for the women's shelter on 5th Street? I nodded. The director is my sister, she continued, her eyes bright. She talks about you constantly. You saved that program. We were going to have to close our doors, and then your foundation stepped in with emergency funding. You've helped over 200 women this year alone. Before I could respond, someone else chimed in. Wait, you're that Emma Grant? My son's school got new computers from your foundation. Another voice, the free clinic on the east side? That's Chin Grant Foundation. Suddenly, people were surrounding us, each with a story about programs I'd funded, initiatives I'd supported, grants that had changed lives. I felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also vindicated. This was why I did the work. These real impacts, these real people. Catherine stood frozen at the center of it all, watching person after person thank me, praise me, celebrate me. The daughter-in-law she'd dismissed as worthless was being treated like a hero. Mom caught my eye and winked. This was why she'd come. Not to embarrass Catherine, but to remind me of my own worth. David Park raised his champagne glass. A toast, he announced loudly. To Emma Grant, who proves every day that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in lives changed. The ballroom erupted in applause. After the toast, the crowd slowly dispersed back to their conversations, but the energy in the room had completely shifted. I was no longer invisible. Catherine stood rooted to her spot, looking smaller somehow, despite her expensive gown and jewelry. Helen had completely vanished. Marcus pulled me aside into a quiet corner. Are you okay? He asked, searching my face. That was intense. I took a shaky breath. I didn't plan that. I didn't know my mom was coming. She's terrifying in the best way, Marcus said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Remind me never to cross Susan Chin Grant. I laughed, feeling some of the tension release. She's a force of nature. We watched Catherine across the room. She was talking to the mayor's wife, but her movements seemed mechanical, her smile forced. I almost feel bad for her, I admitted quietly. Marcus's expression hardened. Don't. She chose every cruel word. She chose to judge you without knowing you. That's on her. He was right, but I still felt a twist of something uncomfortable in my chest. Not quite guilt, but not quite satisfaction either. My mother appeared again, this time alone. I probably should have warned you I was coming, she said, though she didn't sound particularly sorry. But when your father told me what she said about you being not good enough, I couldn't sit home. How did Dad find out? I asked. I never told him about that specific comment. Mom smiled. Marcus called him. I turned to Marcus, surprised. He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I couldn't just do nothing, Emma. I called your dad the night you told me what you overheard. I didn't ask him to do anything, I needed to tell someone how angry I was. My father had listened to Marcus vent, then apparently told my mother, who'd decided to handle things her own way. I should have been annoyed at the interference, but instead I felt loved. Protected. Marcus continued, your dad said something that stuck with me. He said, my daughter doesn't need her money to prove her worth, but she shouldn't have to endure disrespect either. He was right. Mom touched my cheek gently. We've always supported your choice to live independently, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean we'll stand by and watch someone belittle you. I hugged her tight, blinking back tears. Thank you. Although, Mom added with a mischievous glint, I did enjoy that moment of revelation. The look on Catherine's face was priceless. We laughed together, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Across the room, Catherine was making her way toward us. She walked slowly, deliberately, her face pale but composed. When she reached us, she stood for a long moment without speaking. Finally, she looked directly at me. May I speak with you privately? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus started to protest, but I squeezed his hand. It's okay. I followed Catherine out to the hotel's terrace overlooking the city. The terrace was empty, the cool night air a relief after the crowded ballroom. City lights sparkled below us. Catherine stood at the railing, her back to me. I've been cruel to you, she said finally, her voice small. Not just tonight, but for 2 years. I judged you from the moment we met, and I never gave you a real chance. I waited, letting her continue. I wanted Marcus to marry someone from our world. Someone I understood, someone I could. She paused, struggling. Someone I could control, if I'm being honest. Someone who would fit into the life I imagined for him. She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see genuine tears in her eyes. But you were right. My assumptions, my behavior, those were my choices. You never gave me a reason to treat you the way I did. No, I agreed quietly. I didn't. I don't expect you to forgive me, Catherine continued. I'm not sure I'd forgive me. But I am truly, deeply sorry. Not because I just discovered your family's money and power. But because I was wrong about who you are as a person. She wiped her eyes carefully, mindful of her makeup. Hearing all those people talk about the work you do, the lives you've changed. I realized my son chose someone extraordinary. And I was too blind and too arrogant to see it. I stood silent, processing her words. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt of 2 years of subtle jabs and outright insults. But another part of me recognized something genuine in her apology. I can't just forget everything that happened, I said carefully. You made me feel worthless, Catherine. You made family dinners into endurance tests. You questioned my motives, my intelligence, my value as a human being. She nodded, accepting it. I know. And it's not about the money, I continued. Even if my family had nothing, I still wouldn't have deserved that treatment. I work hard. I help people. I love your son with everything I have. That should have been enough. It should have been, Catherine agreed. It was enough. I was just too insecure about my own life to see it. That admission surprised me. Catherine, insecure? She'd always seemed so confident, so sure of her place in the world. My father made his money, Catherine said quietly, staring out at the city. I was born into it. I've never built anything myself, never accomplished anything that was truly mine. When Marcus chose you, someone who actually does meaningful work, someone who helps people every day, I think part of me felt threatened. You were everything I wasn't. I hadn't expected such honesty. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it helped me understand it. I don't know if we can fix this, I said honestly. But I'm willing to try if you are. Not for the sake of appearances or family obligation, but because Marcus loves both of us, and that has to count for something. Catherine looked at me with something that might have been hope. I'd like that. I'd like to actually get to know you, the real you. If you'll let me. We returned to the ballroom together. Marcus and my mother were deep in conversation, but they looked up anxiously when we appeared. Marcus searched my face for clues. I gave him a small nod, and I watched his shoulders relax. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People continued to approach me, some wanting to discuss foundation work, others simply curious about the revelation. Catherine stayed mostly quiet, observing rather than holding court as she usually did. As the gala wound down, Catherine did something unexpected. She approached the microphone where earlier she'd welcomed everyone to her annual event. If I could have everyone's attention for just one more moment, she said. The room quieted. I want to publicly recognize someone special. My daughter-in-law, Emma, has spent the past 2 years working tirelessly to improve our community through her foundation work and her personal service as a social worker. I'm ashamed to admit I didn't fully appreciate her contributions until tonight. She paused, her voice catching slightly. Emma represents the best of what charity work should be: humble, dedicated, and focused on results rather than recognition. I hope everyone here will join me in supporting the Chin Grant Foundation's initiatives, and in following Emma's example of putting service above status. The applause was genuine and warm. I felt my face flush. It wasn't a complete apology, not publicly at least, but it was an acknowledgement. It was something. After the speech, we said our goodbyes. Mom hugged me tight. Call me tomorrow, she whispered. We'll do lunch. 3 weeks later, something remarkable happened. I was at the community center, working with a teenage girl on her college applications, when my phone rang. Catherine's name flashed on the screen. We'd spoken a few times since the gala, awkward but civil conversations. Emma, I hope I'm not bothering you at work, she said, her tone tentative in a way I'd never heard before. I wanted to ask you something. What is it? I asked, stepping into the hallway. I've been volunteering at the women's shelter, she said. The one your foundation supports on 5th Street. I started last week, and the director mentioned they're struggling with fundraising for their expansion project. I was stunned. You're volunteering? Don't sound so shocked, Catherine said, but there was humor in her voice. I'm not completely useless. Anyway, I was thinking I could host a fundraiser. Nothing as big as the gala, but something intimate. If you think that would help. I leaned against the wall, processing this. Catherine Reynolds, who used to spend her volunteer hours on museum boards and country club committees, was working at a women's shelter and planning fundraisers. Catherine, that would be amazing, I said honestly. They desperately need the money, and your connections could make a real difference. Good, she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. I'll need your help, though. I don't want to do this wrong. I'll help, I promised. We talked for another 20 minutes about logistics, budgets, and potential donors. Before we hung up, Catherine said something that made my throat tight. Emma, the director told me about a woman you helped last month. Single mother, 3 kids, escaping an abusive situation. You personally co-signed her apartment lease when no one else would. You put your own credit on the line for a stranger, Catherine continued, her voice thick with emotion. That's who you are. That's who you've always been, and I was too foolish to see it. I blinked back tears. We all need help sometimes, I said softly. I just had the means to provide it. I want to learn from you, Catherine said. If you'll teach me. After we hung up, I stood in the community center hallway for a long moment, feeling something shift and settle in my chest. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a single moment. It was a process, a series of small steps toward understanding. The following weeks brought more changes. Catherine showed up at the shelter regularly, working alongside women she once would have dismissed. She learned their names, heard their stories, and slowly began to understand what real struggle looked like. At family dinners, the atmosphere changed. Catherine asked about my work with genuine interest. She stopped making comparisons to Marcus's ex-girlfriends. She even apologized to Marcus privately for putting him in the middle for so long. One Sunday, she invited us over for brunch. As we were leaving, she walked us to the door. Thank you for being patient with me, she said, looking at me directly. I know I don't deserve it. We're family, I replied. That means working through the hard stuff. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Yes. Family. As Marcus and I drove home, he reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, he said. For everything. For staying true to yourself, for standing up to my mother, and for giving her a second chance. She's trying, I said. That counts for something. The fundraiser Catherine organized raised over $200,000 for the women's shelter. She worked tirelessly, calling in favors, making personal pitches, and sharing stories about the women she'd met through her volunteer work. At the event, held in her home, she introduced me to potential donors with pride in her voice. This is my daughter-in-law, Emma. She's the heart behind Grant Foundation's outreach programs. Not Marcus's wife. Not the social worker. My daughter-in-law. The words carried weight. One evening a few months later, I stopped by Catherine's house to drop off some foundation paperwork. She answered the door in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Come in, she said warmly. I just made tea. We sat in her kitchen, a room I'd never been invited into before. It felt more intimate than the formal living spaces she usually used for company. I've been thinking, Catherine said, wrapping her hands around her mug. About what I said that day. That you weren't good enough for Marcus. I tensed slightly, but she continued. The truth is, I didn't think anyone was good enough for him. He's my son, my only child. I wanted to protect him from making mistakes. She looked at me directly. But you weren't a mistake. You were the best thing that ever happened to him. And eventually, you became one of the best things that happened to me too. Catherine. I started, but she held up a hand. Let me finish. You taught me what real generosity looks like. Not writing checks at galas, but showing up every day to do hard work for people who can't repay you. 6 months after the gala, Catherine and I volunteered together at the community center's weekend meal program. We worked side by side, serving food, cleaning tables, chatting with families. At one point, a woman approached with her young daughter. Miss Emma, the little girl squealed, running up to hug my legs. I knelt down, smiling at her. Hi, Maya. How's kindergarten? Good. I can write my whole name now. The mother, Teresa, smiled gratefully at me. Emma helped us get into permanent housing last year, she explained to Catherine. She didn't give up on us when everyone else did. After they left, Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "That's legacy. Not buildings or bank accounts, but lives touched and changed." We finished our shift and walked to the parking lot together. Catherine's luxury car was parked next to my old Honda. She paused before getting in. "Thank you, Emma. For everything. For forgiving me, for teaching me, for being exactly who you are." I smiled. "Thank you for being willing to learn." She opened her car door, then paused. "Oh, Emma? I meant to ask. The foundation is hosting that gala next month. I'd like to help organize it, if you need volunteers." "We'd love your help," I said honestly. She beamed, then hesitated before adding, "And Emma? When I introduce you to people at the event, may I tell them about your work? I know you value privacy, but I'm just so proud." Her voice broke slightly. I felt my eyes sting with tears. "You can tell them," I said softly. She nodded, blinking rapidly, then slid into her car. As she drove away, she rolled down her window and called out one more thing. "See you soon, Emma. And thank you, for giving me a second chance to be the mother-in-law you deserved from the beginning." I watched her drive off, the evening sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "How'd it go?" I replied, "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." Because it was. Not because Catherine and I had erased the past or pretended everything had always been fine. But because we'd both done the hard work of changing, growing, and building something real from the ashes of what had been broken. I got in my old Honda and drove home, where Marcus was waiting with takeout and a movie. My simple, beautiful, perfectly imperfect life. The one I'd chosen. The one that was always enough. And now, finally, everyone could see it too. Before you go, drop your location in the comments. I love seeing our global community. And please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story.